Hello everyone, welcome to the day one for our 3 weeks program where we will dive deep and learn a lot about API and microservices and talk about all the various best practices that are involved into creating automation frameworks and deploying continuous testing environment. So 3 weeks primarily team, we're going to meet about for an hour a day, Monday to Friday, starting today, and we would go through various topics, not necessarily in the same order, because I might have to introduce you to something at a little earlier stage than later. And the reason being, we want to take some practical examples as we go about learning and implementing all our learnings into our practical assignments team. So focus a lot on what we do in the live session. We will also do a lot of assignments, and that is key for your progress. So this is something we will review at least daily or once every 2-3 days team. Most of the practice that you need to do is trying to repeat whatever we are doing out here, and you would notice how all of these tools and technologies that we're talking about becomes easy for us. And if you look at it honestly, team, anyone who builds something with an intent of getting a popular user base onto it would try and make it user friendly. We just need to learn those specifications on how we need to use that concept or device or tool and so on. All right. So, any questions regarding the training that you have? I could pause for a few minutes and go into that details before we get into the actual subject for today. I also want to let you know that I spoke about live videos. I will upload it daily onto itelearn.com. The sublink, you should be able to find it. I will put this course on top. Okay. Now for a access, we have reset the access. So if you're a lifetime access member, just email us and we will reinstantiate your access to it. What did instantiate? How? Okay, there's no reinstantiate. We will reinstantiate your access. Okay. Um, for the in terms of membership, I know team, you're looking at 2 levels. So you're okay to sign up for any membership right now, which is your basic ITL and premium membership, which gives you access to all the training content. Or you can go for the job placement and certified training, the JPAC program, where we'll do a lot of live projects. The live project will be in a different time. Maybe it'll start right after this training, or it could be in the morning time. But that requires a plenty of time from your end to be able to invest and work on it along with me. About a week's time, I'll get into the live project details team. For now, we will focus purely on the training aspect in a week's time. So the live project will be a little different because we will not just limit it to UI API, we'll go UI API, and we will do take up an application like salesforce.com and build a very CI/CD centric framework. And since it'll be an ongoing project, we will also make it cloud enabled and talk about how we can use some advanced or upcoming technologies like Terraform and Kubernetes to do infrastructure management and deployment there. But that's a story that is down the line. So we're going to get to it. So that's about what I had. If I have questions, great, I can take them now, or I could get going with the subject. Let me know, please. All right, I think the only question that I've received from one of the audience members is about the prerequisites. So team, primarily speaking, for the content that we built, you don't really need to be starting with any strong background in anything except for maybe basics of web. What is a URL? How do you go to the website? What happens when you go to the wrong URLs? Certain things like that is sufficient. When we get to things like karate, for example, you will need to learn Gherkin and get exposed to how Cucumber works in the background. So that is something we will learn as part of it. So this is not needed. When we get to rest assured through Java, you will need the basic fundamental programming skills for that. And again, I will go through quickly on some of these that will help us do get started with it. There is one topic I have kept it as optional for now, time permitting, but if possible, we will also do PI requests. Rather, how do we do API programming using Python? It is pretty similar. Once you've learned what we have listed here, I think it becomes very easy. Other than that, nothing else. Whatever else you require will be part of what we will cover in these 3 weeks. And team, for the membership, so it's basically a common membership for all the courses. It is not like you're paying for an individual program. I know as engineers in today's IT world, you require access to multiple skills. It's not necessarily one field, and there's so many coming up. So if we're good, let's get going with the training itself actually. And any other questions on the prerequisites or anything else, let me know. So team, what are we going to do today? Like I was talking about, one of the most important things is intro to it. I want to be able to talk about what API is and how it has become popular in today's world. We also want to talk about microservices versus APIs. We can come to the architecture differences a little later. I'm talking what we want to maybe cover today. Let's talk about some basic uh, any app architecture with databases. Actually, this is what we were going to cover in the first part itself, using databases and with API, RESTful APIs and so on. We will also start looking at some of the HTTP commands. We will talk about requests, and we will talk about responses. We will take some sample APIs to do the same. But at the end of it, I think we will need to get to Postman to try these out as well. So while we are going to be doing this team, we may spend even the day 2, day 3, day 4 in going deeper into each of these, because there's a list of commands that we will learn. There are a list of responses that you want to be able to understand what each means, and how to use simple tools like Postman to get started with it. All right. So when we look at applications team, I just want to maybe draw a diagram and show you how things work. We talk about a few things, and primarily one of the most important things that we talk about is, I'm trying to draw a layer out here, and let me call this, maybe I'll give it a red, and I call this as UI. So when we talk about UI, what are we referring to? Anyone? We are basically referring to a user interface. So whatever we see, we can interact with, that becomes our user interface. And that basically is either on your web or on your smart devices. That is typically where we look at. Or even sometimes things like Bluetooth enabled devices and so on, which have that access to it. Let me change the text color here. Maybe reduce the size also. And why is this? Because of, okay, there we go. So the most important thing from a human perspective is when I don't know if we have a shape for a human, I think we do, yeah. When we are interacting with any application, your interface is primarily only towards the UI. You are not in any way looking at what is behind those at that point. Now, what lies at the bottom of any application? We're talking about software applications here. What lies at the bottom of a team? And can you be a little interactive just because it will give you a lot of grip? Since you're already here spending this time, make the best out of it, focus for a bit. I know there's plenty of content that you'll find, but you just need to find one, you know, content, one program, and just stick with it. What is at the end of a team? What is it that we will store, we will collect, be it an application like Google or Facebook or any simple applications that work today? They will have to create their, I'm trying to write here, data, and what we call as a database out here. So your database primarily becomes something that you will interact with as a user through the UI. So what gets stored here? Information like what is the user's, let me put a text here. In tables, it will put like user table. It'll say there's a name, there's an address, and there's a phone number. There is, let us say, friends table. We will say that we have a name and a phone number and relation or something to do with it. So you have each table that contains different sets of data. Now, anytime the user has to interact with these tables, and let us say you have a table for accounts where it'll tell you the bank and balance and maybe offers from that bank. So when you log in, you don't see raw data. You see, you don't see incorrect data. You don't see a data from a different user. You see relevant data that is fit for your use. That happens primarily because there will be a middle layer. A middle layer, which basically could be, anything that we do in a full stack development, multiple technologies that we could use, that tells us the business logic. Okay, you know what? This user wants to find the list of all the friends. So we only want at that time a query to get executed, which will say, I only want all the friends who are, related to my wife, or let us say to my friends of my kid, and so on. That decision of what data to fetch, when to fetch, where to fetch from, and who to provide it to, all that decision is made in this middle layer. That's where your business logic, programming, everything comes into play. Makes sense so far, everyone? Yes, team? Can I get a quick read on that? Yes or no? All right, so you got the flow, right? It is going from one to the other, and it is able to get information. Now, how does this information flow? If I'm an IT developer, how do I look at this information? What are the interactions that we do with any database team? They form primarily into four categories. Let me put it into, and here I'll write it. So the first thing that we do, and you can remember this by the name called CRUD, and this basically signifies that if I want to access some information in the database, first it has to exist. So to be able to exist, you have the option, or you should have the option to create a new entry. And whenever I'm talking in this English, we're talking creating data team. The data can be also images. The data can be also PDFs or videos. It can be any sort of content, but primarily what comes out for access. The next one is once you have created an entry in your database, a user might want to read what has entered. Just to read, just to see, for example, what is the balance or what is the weather, or what is the latest news that is happening in today's market. As you go through usage, you will also know that you want to update some data. People change their locations, their address, the phone numbers, balance changes, your banks may change, offers may change. So how do we constantly update them? And that is an update. So these are the three most fundamental database level activities that one performs on any given application. And then finally, you have an option to delete the same. All right. Now, all of this, what I've shown you, I'll try and send this to the back. This is basically your application, or what we in short call as an app. Okay, let me put a different color for this. All right, so far so good. So what happens, a user wants to access information stored in a very raw and not a user friendly manner, almost like tables and spreadsheets, to something that we see in today's world that is more UI friendly, user friendly. So with that intent, we have this 4 operations team. And this is a very critical portion of how you will understand the world of APIs from here on. Create, then you read, then you update, then you delete. Now, this is primarily how applications work in a typical software cycle. It's not a typical software cycle, but app architecture. All right. Now, let me see if I can make a copy of this. API. Now, what is an API app team? So I'll try and design it here, but before that, let me make a new one and talk about the concept on what is happening with it. Okay. All right. So typically what is happening, team, is the same diagram. Now I have an application here. I'll put it in the same color, green. This is my app that I've built. Now, when users are trying to access this application, there's not a single user, right? There are, multiple users and multiple roles. Roles of users decides as to what you can do. If you're an admin, you have more control. If you're a regular user, you get limited features and so on. Now, each of them is primarily interacting with this app, correct? That is what is happening. Now, when I'm saying interacting, what happened? Okay. I, as a user, will send one of these requests called the what I was talking about earlier, the CRUD request. So I'll say create. Then the app within itself will be creating and storing all this Let me take this image and see if it comes there. Yep, good. And at the end of it, anything that we're getting from the user will go through this database and get access to it. Okay. Now the same thing can be done in both ways, where the app is giving a response back to the user saying that, okay, here's the information that you wanted and I'm giving this to you. And this will continue with every user. Every user sends his request and he or she would get uh, oops, their response back. Now, what happens in a world where there are a lot of applications is, I'm trying to get this while I speak. Okay. This interaction, what we have here, is not happening necessarily with humans alone. This interaction is happening with smaller apps, or not necessarily smaller, other applications which have their own um, functionalities, features, and so on. So I have an app 1 here, and then I have an app 2 and an app 3. And each of these applications is for now interacting with this application. All right. So when we are trying to interact here, we are using primarily very simple UI, right? We're saying UI, we will see it on visually on screen, and then we will interact using keyboard and mouse or touch screen. That is primarily what we are doing out here, correct? Now, how should an application interact with another application? Why, number one, should an application interact with another application? Because let us say your banking system is there, okay? Your core banking is one, your credit card department is another, your mortgage department is something else. But if they're under the same umbrella, they still may want to fetch information and give you relevant offers, or whatever products they and services marketing they have. They want to approach you based on that, correct? That is the reason we need something as a protocol for applications to talk to each other. And that protocol is what we call as application programming interface. Okay, and that's primarily API. When I have two applications trying to talk to each other using what we will be touching upon these called RESTful APIs in the cases that we will look at. Why it is a basic common protocol that anyone can build and use it. And some of them have become popular, and you will be exposing ourselves to what these protocols are and how this works. But the end of it, don't you think that even the when we talk about humans to application, okay, I know data is stored. I have some business logic middle layer that will tell me how the data has to be presented to whom, when, what, and all that decision. And then finally, we see it in the application. This CRUD activity should also be done for API. So how do I do that? And for this, what we did is the same CRUD that you see. For APIs, we have given it a little different names. I'll give you the basics of it, team, so that you get an idea, and then we can play around them a lot practically and explore each of them at length. But primarily, these will be your commands. The first is a post team. This will let you enter a new record, just like your create. Okay. Once you've posted a record into your database, or your database has something, then you do a fetch or you read. Whenever you want to read data back from the database and so on, we say get. Then we have something called as a put. This put is primarily to update what is already there. Your bank number is there, your bank account details are there, um, and your account balance is there. You get a new deposit in, your balance will increase with that specific amount. So that requires an update to what is already there. You don't need to post it. So that is a subtle difference where we are putting a record. And in most cases, if it doesn't exist in original, put will put will add to existing or create, either one. But post will create new. So even if there's a record, so there'll be another record that's getting added. We will talk about that subtle difference. Nothing at all to worry. It's more of a good security feature also, as you will understand. Then we have delete. Before that, let's talk about patch also. Patch lets you just update portion of the entire record. What is a record? Again, one row in your data that you have, or it could be multiple results that come out of it. So when users are interacting, these are the basic commands that we give, of course, at a code level, a SQL level, and so on. But when we're doing it in an API level where applications are talking to each other, these are the commands that we talk about. So when we talk about these commands, what is it that we are trying to showcase with it? Let me do it. Team, I hope it's not, you're all with me. Anyone having a bouncer or not very interesting topic so far? Getting along, thank you. Okay, all right. Now let's talk about two applications. I don't want to talk about more applications. All right, I have app 1, app 2. Let's do a little better alignment for these two at least, and maybe little better color. Not a better color, colors are always a choice thing, but yes, I will definitely give you examples of put and patch. Now, app 1, app 2. We are still talking about APIs, all right? And here we will talk about this. So app 1, number 1 has to send a request to the app 2. What kind of request will it send? How does it, this one? Okay, let me try this. Okay, worked to a certain extent. Okay, can I write on this? No. And this is the most important starting point, team. Request. We are sending this one way, saying, you know what? I need some information. App 2, will you give me that information? If everything that you wanted was, where are the other options? One second, team. Where's my color? I can't change color, is it for 2? Okay, that's fine. Mhm. I'm sorry, I'm taking a little time, but as I draw, I'm also trying to get you closer to the point. So this app, what can it do then? Then it'll give a response. What does it mean by a response? It basically knows what has happened. So your request has to have the command as to what we want to do. It is one of those CRUD operations that we're talking about. it needs to know where to perform this. And all of this happens in a web world team. So that is why we talk about this being our primary endpoint URL. We'll talk about URIs also along with it later. Where to perform this? And the final thing it wants is, does it require any data? I wouldn't say test data. Data to perform the same transaction. Any required data. Now, if you talk about trying to correlate this with something in a real world type of a scenario, the easiest one that we kind of can relate with very quickly is, let's talk about a restaurant where we are giving a order for what we want. Of course, where is, in this case, you already went to that restaurant, so you know, or you already um, put it in an online order. And then from a data, you will talk about, okay, it's other specification like you want the food spicy, or you want it well done, you want it low sodium. Those are your additional requests that you put in. Also, maybe your own details like name, credit card, and all that to complete the transaction. So your app one, if you think of as a human and app two as a restaurant, what app two does is very interesting, team. Now it goes through this response. So I wanted to make this. Am I going too slow? I think we will increase the speed, but this is an important topic, so I'm taking a little bit more. All right, thank you. And team, as you get questions, keep adding them. We will take a pause. We will look at questions at that point, okay? Response. So now, what does it mean by response? 1 second, please. So what is a response team? Now we're still going to talk, we're talking about the restaurant where you're a human, app one. App two is actual restaurant. You sent a request as to what food you want with all the details. Now the restaurant or the app two, which is servicing the request, will first say, give a confirmation, right? Now confirmation as to, that's a request. Will I give you the data? What if it is a hacker? What if you're not the right person? What if you don't have the credentials? Or what if I don't have any option to give you what I have? So it'll give me a status code that tells me, you know what happened. Okay, I'll say status 1 means something, 2 means something, 3 means something, 4 means something, 5 means something. So with that, I should be able to know. In the real world, again, it's like, okay, I accept your offer, like what request you put in for your food, I will get it prepared, and here is the food. So you get it delivered, or you'll get a response immediately saying, you know what, we cannot do what you want, I'm sorry. That is the status code. Now it is not just confirmation, you also need some information, right? That will come out. Sometimes you will say the output of what you wanted, and that comes in a specific body. We'll talk about this, team. But again, in a restaurant manner, your food has come out. If the status code was incorrect, like, oh, you know what, I can't service it, there is no output itself. Make sense? What else can I say? I can also talk about time. How long did it take for it? Correct? That's basically it. Now we are talking about two things, requests and response. So there is a sender who we call as a client. So the party A who's sending a request is a client. The party B, or the app 2 in this case, who's providing a response, who is serving your requirement, is the server. All right. Your commands, endpoint URLs, all of this will then fall into those specific categories. So you have a client and you have a server. As simple as that. Make sense, team? Now, give me a second. What did I want to say next? Something was in my mind. I come with a very basic level of structure into the sessions because I know how it will evolve more from, the typical softwares, how they're working. Humans are interacting. APIs, applications are talking to each other. If I want to talk to a database, I create, read, update, or delete using SQL programming or something that the developers do at the end. In the case of APIs, we do post, get, put, patch, or delete. Once we are done with that, then we're talking about how applications are talking to each other. One app sends a request, the other app sends a response back. And what do we want? Where do we want? All that information goes in a request. Response says, you know what? Request accepted, request denied. If accepted, here's the body, here's how long it took, and that provides the data. Now, why are these applications talking to each other? Very simple. They want information. They want information to go through from one to the other. All right. Now, these are applications, team. When we talk about applications, we are basically talking about something that is uh, a combination of many scripts, programs, databases, hardware that is hosting these software applications, other software applications, and reusable libraries, DLLs, everything is there in it. But the end of it, an API is being used to communicate. So this is your basic application programming interface layout. Now, when it comes to, let me explain the concept of microservices, team. Now you'll understand what is happening, okay? Uh, ting, 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 ting. F1. I think I'll take this off for now. I need that. Why is everything going? That's fine. Let me take a couple of apps, just this, put it here. Okay. Now, my app 1 is typically built on modules. Okay. Now, remember this concept, very simple. Humans interacting with the systems, and then we have applications interacting with each other. Now, what we're saying is there is module 1 here called users module. Okay. Then there is another module here called account module. There is another module called credit cards. There's another module called, let us say, offers. When I say module, team, it is primarily trying to divide what the application has as features into something that is easy for the end user also to understand, to be able to organize everything in an easy manner. All right. Now, each of this, and I'm just giving an example of some of them here, but each of these have to interact with themselves. Okay. Some other names here, if you don't mind, I can't edit it. How do they interact with each other? Again, there are scripts written in a regular monolith architecture or what you see in a typical development world. This whole application is written by bunch of scripts. Okay. In a microservices world, what we are doing is we are making each of these talk to them using the same API structure. So what request you saw here is happening now, not with different applications. One second, let me put it. And the request is happening between each of these. So this application is talking here, this application is giving back whatever it wants. And it doesn't have to be one way, it can be both ways. This gives them a very high flexibility. One second, team, let me put this so you get a perspective. Okay. Now, this gives them a lot of control within how data flows inside that application. So they've taken the good learning that they got through this API architecture, where they're able to have applications talk to each other, which we call basically as a third-party API. API, third party or whatever, standalone, third party. This is what it is. Okay. Let me give it a color. And the same thing when we talking here, these are microservices. So think of this like this. APIs is where you are giving an order and the restaurant is preparing the food and giving it to you. Microservices is where interaction within the kitchen staff, the chef, the waiter, the hostess or host, and the entire staff, who are working on it, is also happening as requests and responses team. Okay, this is happening within application modules. So this is happening inside it completely. So the same structure is applied. Now, once we know how these few commands can be sent as requests, what are the different types of responses, 70% of our learning is done. Then we will be getting into things like how does Postman work, and how we can do some certain simple testing with it. How about Java REST assured, or Python requests and so on? What do they do advanced? It gives you more power, more capabilities as these frameworks come together, and you'll be able to understand how they work. Now, any questions so far before I try and run a few sample APIs, please? That is right, Bala. Right, yep. Okay, questions? No? Yes, no, please. That'll be good enough for me. Then what we will do is let's go back to executing a few of these team. Where are we here? So what did we do based on what we wanted? You by now would have understood at least some of this concept team. Anything that didn't look very good? Intro to what is API, how the architecture, database, and with API works. We looked at microservices, where application is being built, where each module is talking to each other using RESTful APIs, and versus APIs where we have applications talking to each other, different applications. So apps talking or talk is happening within the application. HTTP commands, we spoke about CRUD, we spoke about post, get, put, delete, patch. in a similar manner. And these are in fact your API requests. Okay. Responses. So for responses team, there are status codes that come up. Now for us, if we want to work on status codes, I would also want to show you where the status codes come. Let's take a simple start with Postman. I think that is the only way I can get there. So team, so we will talk about the 1 series, 1xx info, 2xx success. 3 is primarily, I won't do it. It has to be done by someone else. So you're redirecting it. 4 is primarily saying that there's an error from client side. 5 is basically saying there is an error, but from server side. We will be exploring these team, but instead of looking at them theoretically, when I say 1xx, it's basically a start. After this, you can have custom some of these. Okay. Now, for requests, I also spoke about this is the command that we're sending. Then you might also have data. And for data, the most popular one that has got used is JSON when it comes to API streams. JavaScript object notation. You must master JSON, how JSON body or JSON objects look, how you can get to access information. What is JSON? Very, very easy and simple format to store and share data. It is similar to XML, but a little bit more user friendly for us to also play around with when we talk about data. So this we will get exposed to. To do that, let us take the help of a tool team. I would want all of you to install, download and install the latest version. The Postman that I saw many years ago to the evolution that it had as I kept seeing it is immense team. So let's just search for Postman, download. All right. So our team, we basically looking at postman.com/downloads. I'm going to also put this link here. I'm going to try and save these images so you have an access to it as well. Okay, I'm here. And now let's go to Postman. So primarily, what is Postman team? Okay. And we have not come to Swagger, documentation, schema, and so on with getting how these APIs work to communicate with or within applications as microservices. So you download the version for your OS. It is a desktop application and you should be able to launch it by saying just like any other desktop application. I was playing around with a few things just to see if this new version is working fine. So looks to be okay. And we should be able to play around. I think News API will be a good one to look at. Okay. So team, what I would want you to do is install this and treat it as an application where we'll spend about 2 to 3 hours in getting a basic feel and understanding of playing around with APIs. Okay. There are a lot of features that have got introduced into Postman, especially when it comes to workspaces, how the mock servers are being provided, test monitors, the entire workflow of how the layout is. They've done a lot of progress, but let us not deviate from the core of what it does. Okay. Primarily, when you get started, you have an option to sign in as a account holder, or you can skip and go to the app directly if you're playing around. What this does is you can organize, save your files, and do a bunch of other things along in with the development community that they have. But let's play around, skip and go to the app. And to do this, one of the first things you require, team, I want to send a request. So I told you, right, for sending a request, you will need a command, a endpoint URL, a data. So command, let us say I want to get something. Get is basically reading. Where am I? Here. So request one, I will send get. But how do I send this? Get, and then I will put a URL, team. Okay. And then finally, I don't know if data is there, but I'll keep it as optional for now. And I want to look at the response for this. Okay. Now, when we talk about a command, you're running them. These are all HTTPS commands, and you basically have to provide a URL. And that URL is called the endpoint URL. I'll talk about why is it called the endpoint URL. Primarily because, let me take two examples, team. Okay. If I say, let me go here, I'll create a new one. Collections, okay, plus, okay, new collection. So when I click on plus, there is something called a new collection that is getting added. Okay, what is a collection? Let me tell you. Very simple. Store bunch of API commands under one folder. Run them together for ease. So primarily what happens is when we are working in this microservices architecture manner, where the application is built to interact with within itself also using this requests and responses, we should be able to um, test or execute, run these APIs and see how they're working, team. So I don't want to write individual ones and store them. Maybe I'll write that, okay, this is a collection, run all of these as one collection. And then I'll have different collections with different purposes, positive, negative, different sets of data, different permutations and combinations of user flows and so on. So collections make you combine API commands into one thing. So your API, so basically when you're creating, you can either create a single request or create a collection. I'm saying let's create a collection. So here, once I click on plus and set collection, I can add a request to it. But let me try and rename this first. So I just clicked on these three dots, click on rename and say March 2022 API 1. Okay. So that's the name I put, and I'm adding a request now. So when I add a request, team, I get this screen. Okay, there's a lot of content here that you will see. Don't worry too much about these tabs. Those are whatever you keep opening up. You basically have what we call as sending your request. You have the ability to do that from here, and you have the ability to get the responses back also using Postman. That is the main feature of Postman as a tool, team. So it helps developers, testers, everyone, right from simple unit testing to automating some of their scripts through this. So now I will say I want to reach google.com, https://google.com. I'm not sending anything into a team. This is as of now my endpoint URL. When I send, click on send, you would notice that it has taken maybe a fraction of a second and given us some details out here. If you look at it, it looks like an entire HTML code. Is that something that is relevant for me or that I want to look into or digest? No, not necessarily. This may not be relevant for me at this point because it is giving me everything that is there. But there are two important things, team, that you'll have to focus on. One is the status, second is the time out here. The status 200 basically says good, all okay. You sent a request, it worked perfect, and here is the response. Nothing was wrong in that entire cycle. And the time is 215 milliseconds. So that's 0.215 seconds. Now, you have done this on google.com, correct? I'm going to create one more. And so I just right clicked on my collection here and I'll say add request. I'll still stay with get, but let me put maybe an address that doesn't exist, something like blah blah blah.com. And then I send this. It basically could not even send the request because it did not hit the endpoint URL. It does not exist. Okay. If I do something like google.com, it worked. Okay. This was the new request. Can I rename this? Yes. Google. This rename bad URL. Okay. So Google blah 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 and save this team. I think we have to. I have two. I have Google. I have bad URL. Let me add one more. Google.com slash some chunk. Okay. Now this is Google bad subdomain or link. Just a name thing, team, that I'm using it to show our collection. Now, my collection has 3 requests. All the 3 requests happen to be a get, and that is fine. Now, what I will do is I can right click on, actually go here and run this entire collection. So I double click this. This is my collection under which whatever we do there, it will come up. I'm now doing a simple run out here, team. So basically, it's giving me the run order as to what are the APIs in what order it's doing. You have a few parameters, don't have to play with them. You don't need to save responses right now. We will talk about them later. I'll just say run this collection. What happened? Get Google and error occurred Postman console. Yeah, see, so it's basically is unable to even go to this bad URL. So let me just put it into a different collection and just keep these 2 correct ones in here. This should be correct. Okay, let's send. See, now the difference primarily that I wanted to show you, team, is if I go to bad URL, it won't even respond with any thing as a status code. You remember I told you there were 5 types of status code. Anything that comes with a 1 at the beginning of the 3-digit number is an info team. 2 is a success. So primarily when I did google.com correctly and I just did this, I got 200 okay. But when I'm doing a google.com but it's bad subdomain or a endpoint URL to it and I send, I get a 404. Now that is exactly what you will find when you go to that website. If I copy this and oops, and I go here, you see this 404 page not found. That's what we get, right? When your application or your web page doesn't have it. This is a custom one that Google prepared and said this is the message. Now that's exactly what it has come also if you look at in the body. The entire HTML code, that's an error. The requested URL, blah, 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 was not found on the server. That's all we know. But your status code is 404 not found. And it gave a very quick response. It didn't take so long because it didn't have a large data to digest or, it just said that, 404 not found. So this is it for us. Now, this way you can continue to play around with a lot of collections. Now, there are a few collections that are there as open-ended that we should try for sure. Why doesn't this minimize? Okay, so what was I doing? Postman, okay, test APIs. So what are test APIs, team? Primarily, There are third-party APIs. What does it mean by send a request, get a response, provided across the tech world? So these are, some of them are free, some of them are private, some of them are premium or paid APIs and so on. And you will be able to interact on these and get some good idea. One of the things that I liked, which I kept here so that I won't forget, was newsapi.org team. Yeah. It doesn't have a place for us to play with all the commands, primarily a lot with get, because it will give us live news based on what we provide. Let's kind of go here and explore this once. So you've got the basic fundamentals of APIs, that anyone can build APIs, others can use it, you can permit them and so on to be able to work with it. And if you notice, team, how many of you have noticed, if you work with GitHub, that now you just have an API or a secret key instead of a user login to get your GitHub? A lot of applications with the development that is happening, you will be able to get something called as an API key, team. So just click on this. It will let you sign up for free. There are packages, yes, but if you're a developer on this new CPI who's using less than 100 requests per day, you should be okay. If you're someone who wants to use this content and publish it, make your own news portal, then you go premium, where you get more request service. Makes sense how it is? Amount of data, amount of information shared. This company wants to commercialize it. Yeah, GitHub, I will talk about the access to it and all once we're getting there. Vijay, quick break, team. Give me a second. I'm sorry. So you're basically signing up for your developer, and you get your API key, team. Once you get your API key, you are, let's go to the documentation. Okay, this is very interesting how you will see different providers, how they create documentation. End of it, it has to tell the same story. All right. Here is a list of authentication. Okay. Big topic. We will talk about it in maybe day 6 or 7. One of the ways to authenticate is just getting an API key. In my Chrome, I already had this. What's this website? News API. API.org. I think I've logged in. Yeah. So it, basically, it'll give you a key that is specific to me, and I can delete it and create a new key as well. And using that, I can send some requests out here. So each of you can do the same thing, team, at your end. Now, what are the requests that News API will accept? Number one, I can just take this, put it in Postman here, right click, add a new request, rename this news one. I will say, here's my URL, the main URL, and say send. It basically says 200 OK, site is good. Here is what you will see when you go to the site. The entire HTML file is downloaded out here. Okay, that's the output that we got. In here, we'll talk about endpoints. Okay, authentication, I'll show you where we will put it. And here are two. Why only two of them are there? And what is this? Everything, top headlines, sources, API. Give me a second, team. API key, country. I see. Okay. everything. Let's see. All right, see, look. Now, this is the link. Earlier, when I gave some incorrect link, it threw an error saying I can't access. It's a 404 resource not found. Now, here is a link where we have the URL of the website. We have the actual folder or main location, which we basically are pointing to within that server. Then there is a query term that we're passing in Q equals Bitcoin. And there's an API key that will recognize me as a user and let news API service that request. Everything that it wants for the details are there in here. I will copy this and I will put this in maybe another request and call this as news2. And team, I've just realized that I am almost at the clock right now, but that's fine. Okay. Now, if you noticed, it is automatically showing you that my two parameters, one after this ampersand Q is the name of the parameter, the value is Bitcoin. How did Postman recognize it? It was easy for it as a tool because it just had to look at this URL. An API key, again hard coded here. This is my API key. You would have your own API key, team. And when I send this request, I will get a good 200. Okay, all's good. You sent a request. I've got you the response. What is the response that I got, team? Here are the details. See, it's got, and this is a JSON format. Do you see that? This is the JSON format in which your response body has come. It basically says, here is my source, which is New York Times. Here is the author, title, description, URL, blah, 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 and content. Again, source, different author maybe, different title, different description, different source itself. And within that source, again, we have a different author, title, description. All of these are the results that you've got for your news 2, which was with a query called Bitcoin. Now, what happens if I just copied this? Give me a second, please. I'm sorry. And I put that URL. Here I changed this from Bitcoin to something like, let's say, gold, and send. And it should be able to give me details that come from that specific term, team. I don't know if it is giving me, but I'm sure, yeah, say it's searched for a term called gold. And it is definitely looking at, I'm sure, the title or the description. And based on that, it is giving us the details. See out here, description. Now, what about I do the same, but I spoil my API key? Okay, Bitcoin, or that's fine, we'll say gold, bad API key. Okay, I've spoiled the API key, and here that doesn't matter. Golf is fine too, and says send. And now you get a different status code, team, which says 401. So your 401 unauthorized is again in that spectrum or in that range of API requests. Where is it? Of where the client is unable to, the client sent an error. So the sender itself is giving us information that I'm not able to service. 500 error is when the server itself is having issues. all information must have come correctly, but there's some issue at the server end through which they're not able to explore. So far with get, we have explored a few of these team. So let's try and run this entire collection and see what happens. Which one do I have as an issue? So it basically is giving me the output team. Let me double click this. There was a better output that we saw. Where did this come from? Let me clear this first and rerun. Again, it's a tool, so it's just about making sure that we have everything correct to run this console. Where did you have an request URL is empty? Where? Which one? Google. This is fine. 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 Which is the request URL that is empty? I don't know. Google. Get Google. Save. Sometimes the save issue also gives an issue. Did I save? Run again. So here, nothing much to test and so on. That's about what it's doing, but it is giving you an iteration on everything that is happening. Team. Here, it's let's see. Again, it's saying requested URL is empty. Save. Save. News one. So this is saved. Okay. Everything is saved. I think we're good here, team. Last try, but just because they're random APIs, the next one that we will create will have a list of much more organized ones because we will build them. How do we post, put all of these? We'll take a good look into it, team. So here's a list of all the responses that we've got, and primarily focusing, if you look at as a summary, you get to see what has happened as a status code, how long it has taken, the size of the data. You can definitely go deeper into each of these and get more details on them. But you have requests stored as a collection that we just executed in Postman. When we come back tomorrow, we will play a lot more with different applications and different commands. Team, so we're good for today. Any questions, please? I'm sorry, it's 7:18, much beyond what I thought. And I'll see you tomorrow at the same time, 6 p.m. Pacific. And any questions, just let me know on the video, on the email. Video, yes. So please, team, subscribe to the channel. That way it's easy for you. Or just go to youtube.com/qtplearn. After a couple of hours or so, you should find this video there. I will also have it emailed. Okay. Thanks, everyone. We'll see you tomorrow then. Take care. Bye now.